Hey y'all, happy Friday, and welcome back to Chef Live. Today, I'm very excited. We are finishing out the month of May and our sort of ChefConf Online hype up, leading up to ChefConf, which is next week. Woohoo! The countdown is almost to zero. We at Chef are all like heads down working on all the different projects that we have or that we are excited to share on Tuesday and Wednesday. So keep an eye out, register for ChefConf at chefconf.io and keep an eye out for all the different sessions that we're going to do. I'll talk a little bit about those later, I think, in the stream. Today, I think I kind of want to jump in straight away and just start talking to our guests, which I'm very excited to introduce. I have been teasing for the last few weeks leading up to this that we were going to have some awesome, oh man. Okay, I'm writing down a note to myself to get a thesaurus and look for different words than awesome and excited. Yes, that is now on my to-do list. Anyway, I'm very excited. Oh my gosh, I just went straight into it again. I'm thrilled to be able to have a group of super awesome community members to finish out what we are calling Cool Shit Week for ChefConf Online. And indeed, it is some pretty cool shit that we're going to be talking about today. So without further ado, I think I'm just going to launch into introducing our guests. We have Brittany Woods, who is an automation engineer from Carfax. And then we have Jason Ressler, Dan Webb, and Jason Field, John Ressler, and Dan Webb. Names are hard, sorry. They are some of the awesome contributors that make up our Sous Chefs team. I'll just launch in and let you all introduce yourselves. And let's start with Brittany Woods.
Yeah, so as Jody said, I'm an automation engineer at Carfax. My focus is on Chef, but I also do infrastructure as code stuff too. I've been a member of the Chef community for probably 5.5-ish years. So a little while. And but I've been in technology for about 8.5 years, almost 9. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's awesome. You are also not just joining us today for the stream. Can you tell us a little bit about the session that you recorded this week too?
Yeah. So yesterday I recorded a session talking about integrating Chef and ServiceNow. But really the overarching theme was data and the data that you can get out of Chef. So I really wanted to drive the point home that that data is valuable outside of Chef, and that not only can you use it in ServiceNow, but really because there's an API, you can use it anywhere. So I recorded that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I am okay. I already used thrilled. I already used excited. I'm stoked to also share with you that Brittany will be joining us on Wednesday, as well as her session airing on Tuesday, June 2nd. On June 3rd, we will be having a Women in Tech panel discussion where we talk about different success tips for advancing your career, despite having maybe some obstacles or barriers in your path that you have to overcome. So Brittany will be joining us amongst a few pretty awesome women whose experiences I'm like, it's going to be a very informative and yes, I'm just very excited about the session. So join us on June 3rd, Wednesday, for the Women in Tech session. And I just remembering, sorry, to keep an eye on the chat as well. And Jason out loud said, woo woo. And I think that's in reference to the Women in Tech session. So yeah, cool. Anywho, let's move on to our next guest. John Ressler, I'm going to go to you.
Great. Glad to be here. So yeah, so I guess my title isn't automation engineer, but everything that I do is around automation. I'm currently working on infrastructure and to support Internet of Things. So we're doing a lot of automation. It's a lot of little servers to control. Yeah, my main involvement with Chef has been through the Sous Chef community. I joined a couple years ago. Was heavily involved rolling out some load balancers at our company and used HA proxy servers. Chef Cookbook naturally led me to a few things. I think there were a few things that maybe features I was looking to get open to PR, and was welcomed actually by Dan Webb with some helpful comments. And that was kind of the beginning of my involvement, and just been, now part of the board helping see Sous Chefs on.
That's awesome. I know mentioned this before the stream, but I wanted to call out the HA Proxy Cookbook is something that the training team at the very least uses heavily. And I, as a former systems administrator, working with an F5, I was like on the Windows side of things kind of in my past life. And I learned the HA Proxy Cookbook during like chef training. And I was like, oh my gosh, there are such easier ways of doing what I was spending so much time doing in my past life. So like, personally, I love it. Thank you for all the work that you've put into it. And on like a professional level, also thank you for that, because it's like our training is like really centered around that cookbook, and another sous chef maintained cookbook, the Apache cookbook. So yeah, many thanks to you for your work on the HA Proxy cookbook. Cool. Let's move to Dan Webb.
Yeah, so I've been doing automation for probably 8 years now, maybe 7 years. I don't know what it is. So however long Chef has been around, since Chef 10, Chef 11. That's kind of when I got into automation and Chef kind of at the same time. I kind of sort of fell into it. A guy I've been working with for probably 10 years was deciding between Puppet and Chef, and he just ended up with the Chef community basically. And he found it way more helpful, way more friendly, that kind of stuff at the time. So we just ended up gravitating towards that. Yeah, that was the end of that. We never gravitated towards anything else, and it was lovely. What I'm doing now is I'm contracting, so I'm not working for anyone else at the moment. Well, I say contracting. I haven't had any gigs for a while because of COVID, which is kind of fun. So I've been writing a lot of open source stuff for mostly Sous Chefs. And one of the big problems we're currently seeing is spending less time doing releases and figuring out doing that. So I've probably spent the last 3 weeks writing and then rewriting several times the releaser stuff, which is pretty cool. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, it's probably gonna be a month. We'll get that out there, and we'll have like a really nice automated pipeline, because over the last 2 to 3 years we spent a huge amount of time on testing and automation, that kind of stuff, within the sous chef community itself. So that was kind of fun.
That's awesome. Cool. And that is kind of a good segue to talk about, you mentioned like the work that you're going to be doing moving forward, and that you've been doing in the past. Dan, if you have been following this stream, Dan's handle, and you have to now tell me how it's pronounced. Because I guess
everyone gets it wrong.
Is it Damicus?
Yes. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Cool. So if you've been like watching the chat on the stream, Dan's handle is Damicus, and he has been streaming what the Sous Chefs have been working on the past few weeks. And moving forward, I'm super excited. Darn it, again. I am, nope, I can only think of stoked now. I'm stoked and excited that they're going to be streaming right here on the Chef software channel moving forward in the future. So, ooh, yes. Thank you, Dan. He said in chat, elated. I am elated. Yeah. So if you have seen him in chat, that is Dan. And now you can put a face to the name. Sweet. So let's finish off. Last but definitely not least, Jason Field. I can remember names now. Jason Field.
Yeah. Hi all, I'm Jason. So I'm a DevOps team lead, started with Chef about 2.5 years ago. Predominantly moved company, ended up doing a Chef 12 to Chef 13 migration and learned a lot in that. On the Sous Chef side of things, I sort of call myself a janitor because I keep migrating build systems every year. So I migrated us to Circle CI with Dan, then I've migrated us to GitHub Actions, migrated another piece back to Circle CI because it worked. And yeah, so my main thing is just building cookbooks and trying to make life easier for people.
That is awesome. And that goes very in line with we as a company did like an exercise to like rebuild our value statement or mission statement. And the I can't remember it word for word off the top of my head. Please don't fire me if my bosses are watching. But the gist of it is we exist to make the lives of IT operators more pleasant, better, to improve their quality of life. And that's like what you're kind of saying there is like going through cookbooks and just yeah, like trying to improve them, make them more efficient or more effective, or like add features and custom resources and stuff like that. So yes, I am delighted that you are all part of the chef community and that we get to benefit selfishly from your dedication and your hard work and your like crazy intelligence. So without further ado, let's kind of launch into like, I kind of want to have just an open discussion about the different projects maybe that Sous Chefs that you all have worked on. And Brittany, maybe you can, if you have any like tips that you can share that wouldn't like spoil your session for Tuesday, I would love that as well. So yeah, maybe actually I'll start us out by asking John and everyone really, but John, can you talk a little bit about the work that you've done on HA Proxy and like, man, I don't, like I said, I started out on a point and click side of the world. And so like, even HA, I think we were using HA Proxy 3.0 up until somewhat recently. So if you can talk about like why you implemented the different changes that you did, that would be awesome. Or really, if you're like, no, I don't want to talk about that, that's boring, you can talk about whatever you want.
No, that's just fine. Yeah, so I mean, right when I jumped into HA Proxy's involvement, conveniently, I started using it right after Dan had completed a rewrite from recipes to use custom resources, which is, is fantastic. It allowed us to do, some pretty complicated routing configuration within HA Proxy. Had a lot of custom routing that we wanted to set up based on different many different APIs, different paths, different query parameters, etc. And being able to configure that pretty pretty easily using the custom resources and building a wrapper cookbook around that was where I first got started. From there, I mean, I don't know, we've had a ton of major things happen since. Obviously, there's been quite a few major versions following SEMVer practices. I think one of the big things that I added in was supporting HA Proxy server version 2, major version 2. So there was some additional resources, some changes here and there to how HA Proxy was working. Added that in. But then beyond that, yeah, for the most part, it's all been, I think, kind of, I'm just looking back through our old, the changelog and release notes, enhancements, following, upgrades for chef versions. I mean, all of the build tooling that Jason mentioned, updating operating system versions, kind of all the standard upkeep housework that comes with having a cookbook that is trying to support a lot of systems.
Yes, I definitely understand the underlying what you're saying there. We, as the training team, demonstrated that we're one of those underlying systems that was definitely relying not on 4 or later. So yeah, it was, yeah. But like once we updated and our, like, I don't know, this goes back to a common theme that we've been talking about a lot on this stream. And one of like our internal initiatives at the company, which is to like pay off a lot of technical debt. So like the technical debt that you paid off kind of encouraged us, or like really forced us to go back and pay off our own technical debt and be like, well, maybe we should be using stuff that isn't 4 years old or 8 years old, or in some cases like the dawn of chef years old. So so yeah, it was nice. Thanks for that encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely. We all got to keep moving forward, right? And versioning allows us to do that well without, I mean, at least you've broken your training environment, so not the worst place.
Yes. Cool. Well, you talked a little bit about like some of the other cookbooks that it sort of related into, or like custom resources. It sounds like a lot of what you all do is like not necessarily like the big fancy features and stuff like that, but like the smaller stuff that makes the big fancy features able to keep working and keep providing that value. Like Brittany, like you were saying, there's more value than just what Chef can do with the Chef information, or what ServiceNow can do with it, or so that's cool. Cool. Dan or Jason, does either of you have projects that you're like, oh yeah, I need to get this off my chest?
Yeah, so I've got a funny story from a few years ago. So custom resources was brought in at about 12.5. I think it was config management camping against whenever 12.5 or 12 was released. John, oh my god, what's his last name? Not Carrie. One of the many Johns that have been through Chef, because we like reusing names, of course. He finished writing the beta of custom resources. I can't remember what it's called, but before it was custom resources, something else anyway.
Maybe lightweight.
No, it was like Super Cookie Funland or something like that.
Oh.
It had a complete like internal beta name. It was beautiful. I was a little bit sad he didn't keep it, to be honest. But it got polished up near the end. And so I'd written a cookbook with that, which did a bunch of inheriting and things. I can't remember. And
John Kaiser.
Kaiser, thank you. Yeah. So Kaiser was around, and yeah, so we managed to rewrite a couple of things with that. I think we tried to write a few, I think not Apache, but HTTPD got rewritten using that style a really long time ago. And then we ended up with Apache 2, and we kind of ignored it for, I probably ignored it for 2.5 years, getting on for 2.5 years, because I knew it was going to be a pain in the proverbial arse. It was written in the old days of HTTPRPs, proper separate resource provider blocks, or files, and totally the way, in fact, it was probably even before that. And the whole thing was a mess, and the testing kind of worked, but was also, when we got to it, was completely and utterly broken. And it was one of those projects where you go, right, I need to go fix the testing first. And that's what we will look at doing is can we fix the testing to make it work? Can we get the testing working on the current thing so we know we've got a good thing? And then start rewriting things underneath the hood. But with a lot of these projects, HA Proxy might have got away with that. Apache didn't get away with it. Java, I table flipped that one. I was a bit impatient with that one. Samba tests weren't working. Basically, most of our cookbook tests weren't working from start to scratch. It was start to finish. It was a real pain. So you kind of end up with like, right, I can't write tests that work on the current cookbook. So you just go, well, I guess I'm doing a major release, and that's the end of that. And someone is going to feel the pain down the line. Not least the person rewriting the cookbook from scratch, going, what does good actually look like? That's really hard with Apache. You're like, well, I think I want a website resource, and I think I want this, and I think I want the config resource. There's this quite common pattern where at least the three basic building blocks of most custom resource cookbooks we end up rewriting everywhere, which is a config resource. So HA Proxy's got one of those. It's got a special kind of one of those, actually. It's quite interesting there. So maybe John can fill us in on that one later on with the accumulator pattern, which we've used in a ton of places. So the config resource is an install resource, and then there's maybe a service resource on top that sort of wraps all the service stuff. And those kind of the basic building blocks, but Apache was just like, nah, right, hold my beer. I need all of these other things. Right, and just like, HA Proxy especially doesn't believe in conf.d directory, so it made it a lot harder. So we needed I need a front-end resource and a back-end resource and a routing resource. Fine, right. I eventually need to bundle them in the same file. Apache didn't need that, but there are a few other things that I might be able to jog my memory if I look at the cookbook real quickly.
I think what you've covered there, though, Dan, is the key thing of all cookbooks. It's trying to define the right API before you start writing the code. Because under the hood, how complex the code, hopefully it's not too complex, but under the hood, it can be complicated as long as the user's interface is simple. Otherwise, it becomes really painful for a user. And I'm sure Jodie in her training would have not appreciated it if we basically said you need to write the command line from scratch every time. As opposed to having nice wrappers on it where you're just declaring the basics that you need.
Yeah. So there was like a conf and a config resource, which looks from the outside really weird in Apache, but they make perfect sense when you actually use the cookbook and also read the documentation. I think maybe someone else can correct me if I'm wrong in saying, like, I think it was about 2 years ago when we started writing documentation directories. So we've got, so in Apache 2, we've got documentation and then all the resources underneath that. And that works so nicely because we've got some really good documentation these days. So some of the resources are involved in setting up. That's just the nature of the underlying systems. You've got to sort of present a really nice API to the end user and say, like, this is how it's a really nice way of configuring this thing, but actually underneath we're doing some crazy, awful, horrible stuff. And you're like, don't worry about that. Just close your eyes. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, it's so the default site's a bit in Apache is a really good one. So depending on which platform you're on, we'll figure out where the default site actually is and what it's called, because of course no platform can. The Debian people think it's one thing, and the Red Hat people think it's another thing. It just doesn't really matter. Like, stop arguing. I don't really care. Just do something. And one real big thing in the last couple of years is we've been able to remove all of the non-system D init systems, which is it's been beautiful. I don't really care anymore. Like, system D may not be perfect, but it's the same kind of awful everywhere. At least you know you're dealing with system D. Yeah, there's different levels of system D, but yeah, there's been some real nice improvements in the last couple of years. And yeah, so John just mentioned in chat as well. Oh, sorry, from Jason just mentioned in chat.
Now we're all doing it.
Yeah. We've been able to remove the excellently written poise. So we had poise service, which had a bunch of like helpful user setup stuff underneath the hood. But it was really hard to debug, and it's no longer maintained. So we've started removing that from all over the places, including HA proxy, which has been kind of sad to see it go, because it was actually one of, hit a real good spot. But these are the kind of things we end up releasing a major version for. Is like, yeah, turns out we've removed the need for poisons version or something like that.
Okay, so you have talked about so many different things that are like important or interesting, or like, ooh, that would be intriguing to look into. So that brings to mind a question for me. Is there like a centralized location where I can go to look at all the stuff that sous chefs are working on, besides like going to supermarket and kind of looking for sous chef as contributors?
So you're probably good at going to github.com/sous-chef. Chefs, sorry, so plural. Let me just drop a link in the Twitch chat.
Oh, I got it, I think.
Oh, here we go. Brilliant.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, Supermarket works and GitHub works. GitHub is, if you looked at GitHub 6 months ago, before you got Zorima Bot, which I think Jason should talk about next. So there's some beautiful magic going on there. If you looked at it before 6 months ago, you would have seen our active cookbooks, and you see like these are the top 20 cookbooks that we probably regularly churn through and got a lot of contributors through. There are a few that we don't actively like Vault and Console. They're so hard to update. And a lot of us don't use them. So a lot of the core contributors don't actually use some of the lesser updated cookbooks. So we're always looking for contributors for those things. And if anyone wants to just jump in and be like, right, I need to fix this because I actually use Vault, we're like, yeah, like, please just rewrite that thing from the ground up. If you have a figure a way of writing Vault properly, then we're all ears. We just happen to be a place that is keeping.
I was going to say, just to add to that, if you're not comfortable in rewriting them, we're happy to help you on the Slack or in GitHub. And if you're even not happy with that, just raise issues with, this clearly needs to be rebuilt. Here are the use cases that I personally use it for, because the more use cases we have, the less chance we are of going to go and break you. But on that same thing, we're going to always try and support the 95%. If your use case is that you want to install 16 copies of Apache called Apache 1234567, all using initd on a Red Hat 5 server, we're probably not going to be the right people to support that.
Yeah.
Because it's such a bespoke use case. And we're trying to cover what we can actively test and maintain as essentially open source contributors.
Okay, so
I completely missed Tim's point. It was called Crazy Town. The custom resources before custom resources were called Crazy Town. It's a beautiful name.
That's a pretty good name.
It changed the whole paradigm of chef, really, for a lot of people. It made writing so you don't have to write heavyweight resource providers and then lightweight things, and it just made the whole thing much more accessible to many more people, and it was
Yeah.
it's a proof of getting the API right for your users is super important, and he just really nailed it on the head for that one. So
yeah. And if you I think Tim and Lamont talked a little bit about that a couple weeks ago on the stream. So if you missed that, if you head over to the Chef YouTube channel, you can catch that conversation, and they go into a lot of depth on all the different things. So I want to take a moment to also ask, so if someone out there wants to contribute and like be a part of Sous Chefs, there's there's kind of two ways they can do that, right? They can like join the Sous Chefs organization and contribute by, like you were saying, submitting issues or PRs or like working on the code, but they can also support you financially through, I think I have the link here. Yes.
Yeah,
Open
through
Collective.
Open Collective.
Okay. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Garth, for dropping that in there. So in the chat is the Sous Chefs Open Collective site. Head there and you can figure out, or you can learn about the different ways you can support them, not necessarily through code. So yeah. And then if we wanted to join the Sous Chefs org, would we go to the GitHub repo and do something there, or is there somewhere else I should head to look for that?
So
you
inside,
say hi.
yeah,
Say hi in either an issue, kind of become a regular contributor, and so you don't need to be a member of the Sous Chefs to submit PRs or anything like that.
Okay.
If you want to become a regular contributor and you want to become part of the org, become part of the 55 other people who are part of the org. If you want to be kind of like responsible for a cookbook and say like, I really like the HA proxy cookbook like John did 2 years ago, and you're like, right, I want to take this. This is the thing I really care about, and I want to own this. I'm gonna right, I want to get this really good. You can talk to me, Jason, John, or Tim, and just say, yeah, I'd like to look at doing this. Just pop it in the chat in Slack.
I do have that.
Through there's Slack in there. Brilliant. Yeah, so in the Chef community Slack, it's in there. If you go to the Sous Chefs channel, that's probably where you'll find us most of the time. If you don't have Slack, you don't want Slack, you don't want to contribute that way, you can just open a PR on any of the repos and just start a conversation on there. Say, hey, look, I'm going to become a member of Sous Chefs. We'll always accept anyone, no matter how chatty, what time zone they're in. I think right now we're in like 16 time zones. I don't know. I lose track. So yeah, we're pretty good with the async communication because we have to be.
Awesome. And I dropped. Oh, sorry.
Just to add to that, if you do want to join, the repo I've already dropped in the chat. It's the Terraform GitHub org. So we manage our entire repos by Terraform because I don't like the idea of, oh, you can only join if X, Y, or Z is on. No, go and issue a PR and then I can look at it when I'm on and we can carry on the async conversation. It's really bad if, say, you're out in the Far East and time zones basically mean that you got maybe an hour of catching one of us. Whereas using this, it just makes life easier.
I love the sort of like asynchronous, like you're saying, the async, your ability to like follow the sun, as they say. That's awesome. And oh shoot, you said something else. Now I can't remember what it was. Darn it. Well, now I can't remember. But while I try to jog my memory, I do want to say really quick, like, first of all, I would love to see any like code snippets of like custom resources that you've built that are like cool or exciting, that would be cool. And then Dan, oh yeah, and you just put it in the chat too. Earlier you mentioned something about Zarima bot. Am I saying it
Yes.
correctly?
I have to ask Dan how to pronounce my handle because he corrected me the other week.
That's hilarious. So, okay, I have to ask what the heck that is. And like anything with a bot in it gets my attention. I like bots for some reason. So I'm already intrigued. But can you tell us what the heck that is and why Dan keeps bringing it up?
So I think to start the story off, you have to start at the basics. Chef's got Cookstyle. Cookstyle gets shipped fairly frequently, has nice rules and auto corrections to make our life easier. And we will go and run Cookstyle on a cookbook if we're actively developing it, and then we'll do the corrections on it. Which basically means that unless someone's touched that cookbook who remembered to run it, there's a good chance that there's updates that aren't going to get included. And as the guy doing the build systems, it gets annoying to see things failing just because of Cookstyle. It's valid that it fails, but it's not a nice user experience to go and edit a cookbook and, oh, now I've got to fix 20 Cookstyle rules when all I'm trying to do is add a feature or fix a bug that's affected me in work internally. So what Zarima bot, however Dan tells me I should say it later, is basically a PowerShell script that runs inside a Kubernetes cluster that checks out every cookbook in both the Sous Chefs org and the Chef Cookbooks org, because Tim decided to give me access, and runs Cookstyle on every single cookbook. If there's an issue or if there's any corrections, it will automatically open a PR up so that as maintainers, we can go in and we can just merge the latest Cookstyle changes. And by latest, I mean the minute that a new Cookstyle version is released, before it's even included in Chef, we're running it. Within 24 hours, it's automatically there and it just runs through. That was the primary purpose, and then I went and did a couple other things, but let's discuss that if you want first.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're essentially automating the patching process when Cookstyle gets patched, and then like implementing the autocorrect that has like relatively recently been implemented into Cookstyle, and auto correcting your cookbooks automatically.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is cool. Okay. I'm now going to open GitHub. Is the code for that on your GitHub site?
It's on my personal one. One note, I managed to write a PowerShell script that only runs on Linux. One day I will go and fix that, but I come from a Windows background. PowerShell is my fastest language, and partway through I decided just using curl was faster. It was written very much in a hackathon style. It just needed to get made.
MVP.
Yes, MVP. I think I built it over one of the bank holiday weekends a couple months ago. I've just had enough of this, and there's better things I can be spending my time on.
Well, that's awesome. I will keep an eye out as you continue to work on that, though. But that is really cool. Yeah, I'm gonna follow this because I feel like that would be super useful. Do you mind if everybody in Twitch land also follows that?
So there's a blog as well on the Chef blog about this and the other functions that we wrote, that I wrote that same weekend.
Ooh, I've clearly not been paying attention to the Chef blog as closely as I should be. I'll grab that too. That's awesome.
Brittany, I love that comment of revolutionizing cross-platform. I'm not sure Microsoft quite envisioned somebody turning PowerShell into something that only runs on Linux.
How hidden is this?
But yeah, the other couple functions that are in it. So we've got some label management in it, which is we can manage GitHub labels with Terraform. The problem we always found with that is it was very quick to hit the GitHub API limits when you're checking through about 20, 30 extra calls per repository. And I think we've probably got 100 to 150 repos in Sous. So added that functionality just so we've got standardized labels everywhere. And the other thing that I think was the key thing to me was standardizing files. So ensuring you've got an editor config in every single cookbook, so everyone's coding to the same standards. For Dan and I, who use Durham quite heavily, having an mbarc file, ensuring you've got an accurate delivery file, ensuring that your Git workflows are correct, that your Circle CI configs are correct, and various other things in there. And it's moving that conversation on from what I think is right, because I have to be the guy who's willing to do a PR to everything, to saying, as a community, what are the files that should just be the same? And like the cook style one, I do the checkout, I then copy the files over the top, and if there's a difference, I issue a PR. At no point do I want to directly push to master. Everything should always be a conversation to me.
I think that's fair. Sorry, I'm just keeping up on the chat in Zoom too, and in Twitch. Yeah, there's a ton of links that we just shared. And Benny, our community manager, is in the chat as well, and she definitely has my back. Thanks, Boo. Oh, and I should, that's a good segue to mention Benny is going to be one of the moderators for the Women in Tech panel that I was discussing earlier, but also she's going to be moderating and facilitating another panel discussion amongst a bunch of professionals in the community building and sort of open source realms. So keep an eye out for that on Tuesday, June 2nd, which is next week. Yes. Oh, and yes, thank you, Jason, for pointing that out. Jason and John are actually both on that panel. So apologies for not mentioning that earlier. That is pretty awesome as well. Cool. Sawyer123 knows my my deepest hopes and dreams in life are to become famous. And to get there, I should buy my followers. So yeah, I will definitely consider that.
She's considered it so hard that she's dropped off the stream.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that I'm going to write that down because I need to buy some followers. So
yeah, I could do some more subs on my Twitch.
I thought you spent all your earnings in the last couple months on followers, Dan.
Maybe. Let's see if you can give her a couple of minutes to rejoin.
I don't know if I don't know if they liked her tone. It's maybe a DDoS attack.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I might use this opportunity then to talk a bit more about the GitHub Actions stuff that we did this year.
Yeah.
So last year, Dan migrated us over to Circle CI primarily, with me just giving a bit of help. And I'll say this, Circle CI is brilliant. It is a lovely interface and it does work well. As a community, the only problem we had was the length of time it took to run tests. So Circle CI is a paid for service. They'll give you a few runners for open source for free, but you're talking 3 or 4 at a time. GitHub Actions, when it went live, basically said, if you're open source, you can have 20 runners running in parallel at a time. So I went and played with that a bit, created an org in GitHub called Actions Hub, just to keep that code away from Sous Chefs, just keeping us focused on what we're doing. And then as part of that, I went and migrated to HA Proxy, which I don't know, Dan, John, do you remember how long that used to take? Because
it was close to an hour every time to complete all the tests, because we were testing, we have so many supported systems in so many test cases.
So I was riffing on you the other day, and I was like, oh, Circle CI doesn't take that long, blah blah blah. And I think it was the Graphite cookbook, maybe, or the Grafana cookbook, possibly.
Grafana, probably.
I think it's Grafana, and it hadn't been. There's some config that I think it got missed somewhere. I mean, you were like, well, I reckon Circle CI probably takes forever. And I was like, no, it couldn't take that long. I looked in the logs. It took 2.5 hours for each PR to complete.
To put this in perspective, the HA Proxy Cookbook, when I first migrated it, I saw it actually use 37 runners in parallel and finish in about 8 minutes. At which point I was sold and I went and migrated everything else without asking anyone. Because that's what you do.
It's true.
I like that. Where earlier you were like, oh, I think we should all talk, and I think you should talk before you do these things. And then you make the point, no, you don't. You just do it.
To be honest, as a community, I think the time savings were just such great difference that there wasn't really much for debate there. And yeah, it just worked. It was literally changing the config. And the problem was, I think our Circle CI config was probably around 300 lines in some places, because you had to duplicate the same bit of YAML. Whereas in GitHub Actions, they basically have a matrix, which is a loop system. So you have a, what's the OS, what's the suite? Okay, just run through these. And you're now down to declaring about 10, 15 lines for that section instead of X 100.
Yeah, Circle CI's lack of matrix support is a real killer. Well, it made it a no-go for maintaining it on a long term. It was
we ended up creating a generator to generate the code, and when you start having to create code to generate the code that tests your code, you know you might be using it incorrectly slightly there. I think so. We started off with just Linux testing. I know that Dan's recently managed to get the Mac testing working as well through the GitHub Actions, and we're aware now of how to do it in Windows. There's a small bug in the Test Kitchen exec driver that we're trying to get fixed. Once that's fixed, we can also do Windows testing via the exact same suite. In the meantime, I know Jeff at Chef has done some work as well to enable you to at least do Windows testing via Chef Zero and Inspect directly. But yeah, as a solution, it was just that time saving it made for us that was ridiculous and really useful to me. And it looks like Jodie is rejoining.
She's kind of. Her internet's fallen over by the sounds of it. And she's back on Zoom on her phone. So she's probably going to have...
I am back on my phone. Yeah, holy smokes. Internet just dropped out hardcore. So I had to go power cycle my router, and we're just waiting for it to come back up, I guess. Anyway, oh yes. Thank you, Jason, for keeping on going in my absence. I super appreciate it. Hopefully I can get my internet back up and running in a minute. But yeah, I was going to ask you all for some awesome code. Oh yeah. Let's also, thanks Dan for
She gone again.
I think she's gone again. So Brittany, do you want to tell us a bit more about things you've been doing in the community and things you've changed as we've been talking for too long?
Sure. So as I talked about earlier, yesterday I recorded a talk. I don't want to give like a super lot away about it. But basically the point was taking data out of Chef. That's very useful in Chef, but actually like taking action on that data. And so to do that, we are using ServiceNow. So to do that, we're basically exporting that data across over to ServiceNow from Automate. And all of these integration points have really allowed us to kind of improve the, honestly, improve like the company experience with all of this Chef stuff. Because not everyone is a chef user, honestly. So we have a bunch of business users, our change manager, for example, and they simply don't know how to use Chef because they don't need to. But that data is still very much useful and actionable to them. So by porting this data over, like the change manager, for example, we've given quite a bit of insight into what's happening in Chef and what's changing and what's what promotions are happening, which then allows better understanding and correlation of like conflicts or anything else that may pop up on the change calendar. But the other main integration point for us was incidents. And again, without giving too much away, there's like two types of chef data in my mind. There's node data, which is more of that like configuration item data that's important and you should know it and you want to look at it. And then there's event data, and that's those incidents, those cookbook failures, or those cookbook promotions, somebody made a change, things like that. So those incidents, what they allowed us to do was they allowed us to take our failure rate down from a normal expected amount of failures in our 4,000 server fleet would be like 50 to 70 before. And so you just see 50 to 70 on there and you're like, okay, that's an intermittent failure, not sure what happened. But then you would have to filter through and be like, okay, what is failing? Is something failing widespread, or is something failing on a single node? So there was really no easy way to see that. And so by sending these incidents to people that actually care about them and people that actually can do something about them, we were able to reduce that failure rate. And now we'll normally see less than 14 failures just on any given basis at any point in time in the day. And so if you see more than that, then of course, you know that something's going hairy. But the whole point is, though, that we could have done that without integrating with ServiceNow, but it's really not a good user experience because they have to filter, they have to understand what they're looking at. There's 700 cookbooks and 4,000 nodes, and some of those cookbooks are applied to all 4,000 of those nodes. How widespread is this problem? So it really gave us a lot of insight that we weren't previously getting. So that's a small little window of what I talked about yesterday in the recording, and everyone will get to see next week.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go. No, you finish.
No, I was just going to wrap up and just say that while I focused on ServiceNow, because of course, like I'm a customer of Chef, so we're using ServiceNow. I also made the point, though, that you don't have to. Like, if you want to feed this data into some Kibana dashboard or Elasticsearch or whatever you're looking at, you can, because we have an API. So
that's awesome. I really like kind of, there's a couple themes in just you describing what your session was about and the work that you've done. And one of those themes is like very common to DevOps, like breaking down silos and making what typically or historically might have been thought of as like, oh, that's infrastructure information, or like config management information, you know, or like, and that's for the people with beards who sit in the dungeon of the building and make sure that everything works when we need it to, you know, like, that's sort of historically been the like sort of attitude around it. And now it's like, no, this is valuable business information that people outside of automation engineers or systems engineers or IT operators, or even like the whole software development organization in general, that people outside of those organizations can start to draw value from. And it also really, really improves transparency in the organization as well. Like you were saying, sure, you can see that there's 50 to 70% or like it's failing 50 to 70% of the time, and that's like, yeah, it's mostly working, right? So maybe I won't look into it. But like the more information you start to pull together and aggregate, the easier it is to say, oh, actually, that might only be happening 50 to 70% of the time, but 100% of those times it happens around these other 3 events, or around this certain thing occurring. And then you can say, like, we're not just we're not just following the 5 nines rule or whatever. We're not just available all the time, but like we know exactly why we're available all the time, or like why we might not have been available all the time. So yeah, sorry. That I really like those themes. So if you are like me and you think that sounds, hold on, let me go back. Oh no, when I lost internet, I lost my list of of synonyms. Too excited. I'm thrilled. I'm exhilarated. Oh, there was one that started with an S, I think. Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. I'm euphoric. That I get to watch this session on June 2nd. So everybody head to chefconf.io to register, and you can catch Brittany's session then. You can also, additionally, if you head to, like I just said, chefconf.io, you can also register for the community panel that Jason and John will be sitting on. You can also register for the Women in Tech panel that Brittany and myself and Benny will be participating in, amongst other people. And then last but not least, you can sign up for the ChefConf Trivia Night, which is going to be hosted also right here on the Chef Software Twitch channel. And we got this cool like integration with Twitch that is, I think it's called Quiz Kit. And you can like actually interact with the stream and like click your options. And it's kind of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire style, where you'll get 4 answers. And then if you pick correctly, you add money, not money, but points. And if you pick incorrectly, you lose that same number of points. So it's going to be pretty fun. And I get to be kind of on the like behind the scenes since we're using the Twitch stream, and so I got to see some of the questions, and I think it's going to be pretty fun. We'll also have a chef themed round where we have a bunch of questions where you can prove your I almost said prove your salt, but that would have been a faux pas, right? You can prove your chef worth. Yes, thank you, Garth. Yeah, you can prove your salt and show that you know everything about chef, or as I did when we did the practice round, show that you know like 50% of chef's history, it sounds like. So yeah, that concludes this bit of the ChefConf Online promotional portion. Not 13 says, yes, I agree. Lol. Anyway, so yeah, I had questions written down and now I can't find them. But we were gonna look at some code, I think. One of you, yes, Dan at the very least. Cool. So let's kind of dive into some of, and sorry, before we do that, Mandy says Joshua Timberman, and she wrote a lot of the chef questions, right? So if you're not familiar with chef employee history, Mandy has been at the company for over 8 years. And Joshua Timberman has been at the company since day 0, if I'm not mistaken. So if they're writing the questions, you're going to get some good ones in there. So I think that is at 5 p.m. Pacific time here at twitch.tv/chef software. But actually, let me bring up chefconf.io/agenda. And that is going to, not surprisingly, based on the name of the link.
Oh, our internet's going again.
Uh-oh.
Oh. I was about to say, so Sous Chefs now own most of Joshua Timberman's old cookbooks. So one of the 3 of us in this room has probably rewritten all of Joshua's work at this point.
Give you the agenda for ChefConf next week. Surprise, right?
What's going on there? Yeah, so I can go through the Java. Ooh, is she back?
Well, do you want to go through the Java cookbook while she stabilizes herself?
So, hello. I don't know what's going on.
Let's. Oh, sorry, just trying to leave on my phone. I don't know what's going on with my internet today, and if this happens for much longer, I don't know. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Sorry.
I feel a strongly worded letter in your future, right?
Dear internet people, I only reach out to my ISPs. Oh my gosh, sorry, my phone is like, I can hear it. I only reach out to my ISP's customer support when I want to yell at someone who doesn't have a face, which I feel really bad admitting out loud now. But
I do the same thing.
Sometimes also, I will admit to this if anyone else will too. Sometimes I also like flex my tech knowledge too. When they're like, have you tried restarting the router? And I'm like, remember at the beginning of this session when I told you all the steps I had already done and that was one of them? Yes, I have done that. Anyway, yeah. Let me go to Dan, because Dan, I think you were going to share some code and talk about what's going on in it. And I will mute myself and try to figure out what the heck is going on with my internet while you do that.
So there's a couple of sort of Chef 16 things that we want to improve with the Java cookbook. And there's a nice new pattern where we split out all of the Mac resources, the Linux install resources, and hopefully eventually when we get Windows testing working, Windows install resources. So I'll just go off and share my screen with, so so let me just start off over here. Can you see that? Bro, okay, cool. So we've got a ton of OpenJDK resources. If I just open these up, you'll see how actually kind of horrendous they are. There's lots and lots of properties. In fact, these are just the Linux ones. These are just the macOS ones. And surprise, surprise, I didn't know Tim was making resource partials or Lamont was making resource partials, but I was literally writing this as they were writing it in Chef 16 land, so that's going to be pretty sweet. There's that install resource. And then we need to store things specifically with Homebrew if we've got the macOS stuff there. And then then we sort of drop down. So you call OpenJDK resource, so adopt OpenJDK install resource, and then it figures out what platform you're on. And once it's figured out what platform you're on, it'll call the sort of the relevant resource underneath the hood, which is real nice. But as a result, we've got to make the macOS configuration options available in the main resource and the Linux only ones. So bin commands aren't a thing in Macland. We don't need to set the mode, the owner, and the group at all, because Homebrew just takes care of all of that stuff. So the macOS install options are super, super simple. And I'll just bring up the Linux one. There's a specific checksum resource. It's got a number of different variants.
I think we're actually not seeing the screen that you are sharing, or it's at least not changing in. Oh, there we go.
Yes, I've clicked the button somewhere. That's fine.
Woohoo!
Okay, so thanks for that. Yeah, so it figures out what I'll start from scratch. So there's an OpenJDK install resource, adopt OpenJDK install resource. It figures out what platform you're on using the nice platform family stuff. Once it's figured out that, it will call the underlying either Linux or macOS resource. As a result, it needs the Linux options at the top here and the macOS options. So actually, resource partials make all of this much, much easier, and doesn't mean that if we add an option to the Linux resource, we haven't then got to copy that to the other resource to make it sure it's kind of works, which is really, really nice. And the nice thing about this is I don't really care what platform I'm on. If I'm installing adopt OpenJDK, I could be installing it on the Mac, I could be installing it on my Linux machine and my Windows machine, but I want them all to run the same recipe underneath the hood, which I can show you in the test folder, because we have tests for these things these days. So under hood, we're using inspec because why not? And then if I go to recipes and adopt OpenJDK, and this is why the Java cookbook takes probably an hour, even with 20 runners to run. We have a huge matrix of things we go through. So let's go hotspot, for example. So all we do there is say adopt OpenJDK install, and that figures out which platform we're on, and then we can do all of the magic for Linux on the Linux resource here. So we can go into variant and make sure that we've defined one of these variants, because these are the only valid variants. We build a string for them for the URL. So if they haven't given us a URL, they've just given us a version, we can figure that out for them. And I'll come back to these really, really helpful helpers in a second. And then eventually it will go down and do quite a similar thing to what the old Java cookbook used to do, is make sure the extract directory exists, extract the archive, unzip the disk, and then put a template out for the jinfo resource, all this kind of stuff. It's pretty standard Java stuff. But you'll notice that we don't necessarily have to call every property. So we have a default, and wherever we see lazy, this may well go away in Chef 16 if we use a unified mode. So I need to figure that out if we do. But this will get evaluated, and the default adopt OpenJDK URL will be given to us by this little helper. And thankfully, GitHub's done some parsing of our code, and we've got a horrendously long
that case statement is amazing.
Yeah. So then we've got this pretty huge hash, but this hash used to be it used to be in a single file with 30 or 40 other node attributes, which was really, really unreadable. and unmaintainable. I once went to maintain this the known attributes file, and I was like, where the hell do I start? I can't figure out the indentation. This is just, and it was the best way of doing it at the time. And now Sous Chefs as a whole have pretty much moved away from node attributes, unless it's an automatic node attribute, or we haven't figured out a way of sharing state between resources at the moment. We've pretty much moved to helpers like this. So it will usually start with like default something, because we're saying we'll give you a default value, but you can totally override any of these things. So we can give you if you give us a URL, we won't use this value. And give a hash. And this goes for like the HA proxy cookbook, the Apache cookbook. If you name something that's got a custom resource, it's probably got a set of helpers that have defaults that we can easily maintain these days. The thing why we've gone away from known attributes is you don't end up reaching into the guts and the bowels of our cookbooks that we've said, this is the way our interface is up here, and we test using this interface. If you come down here and change a thing, we haven't tested that you've changed the internals of our cookbook. You can still do that with edit resource, but we don't support that. So we usually say, if you change known attributes, you can change them, we just don't look at them. You pass them into the top, into the custom resource, it's just the resource at the top, and then we figure out what to do underneath the hood. And you can override everything as you go along. And that kind of sums up exactly how we have redesigned all of our cookbooks and pushed the interface straight to
I was going to say, Dan, I think the other thing that is also really key to cover with the sort of helper libraries is the fact that you can use RSpec to actually unit test them. So we can be certain that the outputs are right. And again, there's all testing. Unit testing against infrastructure is always a bit of a hit and a miss, but unit testing against libraries to ensure that they're returning what you expect are fantastic. And I'll let you take it back over here, mate.
Perfect timing. So that's a great steer towards these helper libraries. So before, we couldn't test any of those known attributes at all. They were just like, well, it's probably right. Are we returning a hash? Did we need a hash in the first place? So now we say, well, the subdirectory, I think we've got there we go. So we end up stitching together a bunch of things that give us the right URL, and I don't really care what it is. And this is basically, it looks like a hard-coded resource, hard-coded string, because at the end of the day, we end up with a string. We know if we give A, B, and C, we know that it will be in its exact order. So it looks like a dodgy bit of testing, but it actually works really well. This stuff also runs blindingly quick. So we haven't got to stand up any infrastructure. We haven't got to stand up any Docker instances at all. The whole thing runs in about, I think, maybe 10 seconds at a push from start to scratch, which is pretty sweet. Underneath, we can test the barrels really easily.
Just to append to that, we do use the chef delivery system to run the tests, the same as all of the chef cookbooks, which means that you just run chef exec delivery local all, and it just does this. It does cook style, and back when food critic was a thing, it did food critic. So it might be a bit of an abuse as to what delivery was originally designed for, but it works really, really well. Just that simple git hook on your command line. Oh, I've definitely got everything passing. I'm not going to push up a dodgy cook style rule and then go, oh, time to do a false push because I don't want to admit to that.
So that's like all of these things kind of stitched together mean that, so delivery is a really great example. We maintain a single file in a single repo. It happens to be a chef's cookbooks repo. And we pull that through and we maintain that in one place. With the cookbooks and the standardization file PRs that come through, we manage those standard files in that repo over there. And all of these things mean that we get to concentrate on the cookbooks and the quality of the cookbooks that come through. We don't spend, or we're spending less and less time these days. The more things we're standardizing and removing from our day-to-day operations is maintaining the cookbooks and making sure the readme's right. That's another project that will come up in the next year, is probably making the readme automatically, because there's a template you can make from that, which is pretty easy. The changelog is pretty damn easy as well. Delivery is a no-brainer. We've removed all the rate files and replaced them with chef exec delivery local org, which just runs all of this local phase here. What else is there?
I think just to take a note on that cook style thing, I know I'm the guy who wrote it, so I'm a bit biased here, but the thing I like most about it is the fact that because we're running it at the minute it's released upstream before it's in Chef, when it reaches Chef Workstation, we're already passing those tests. We're not in that sort of, oh, and now it's reached Chef Workstation, it's going to fail everywhere until we go through and merge. I like to be ahead of that curve so that when people are using our cookbooks, and if they are enforcing cook style passing in their own org for community cookbooks, if they're forking them or something, at least we know that we're going to be in a good state where we will always be passing those on the latest.
That's awesome.
I'm going to close off on this one and say, so we've moved away from Circle CI to GitHub Actions, and our GitHub Actions are in the usual GitHub workflows file. We've got a CI file in here. On every push, we've got delivery runs, and we've got a bunch of like really helpful sort of YAML lint, markdown lint, and then we end up with doc on which ex-chef employee wrote. So Sean O'Mara wrote 2-3 years ago now, which is pretty sweet, and that just runs up a Docker machine locally. So it spins up a chef machine, sort of chef sidecar, a local Docker machine as well, and then just runs one chef against those machines. So we've got support for basically everything. And Docker machines are quick to build. We get new builds of sort of onto pretty damn quickly. And if you can imagine writing this matrix out, and the include and the excludes out manually without a matrix, the matrix was pretty damn big with this one.
Yeah.
Dan, I've sent you the Apache matrix and workflow just as an example there.
Oh yeah, that would be good. There we go.
So the CI here, I think, is 77 lines. So all the OSs, all the suites, and I think that it's so close to Kitchen that it's fairly easy to understand what it's doing.
Yeah.
And then, do you want to open that link I sent you to the Circle CI, the original one, Dan?
Not really, no.
So it gets to a point where you just start looping over yourself.
Oh my gosh.
And this does less than the new one as well, because we've moved it a bit further forward. So yeah, we changed a lot of things in Sous Chefs. So we've changed.
Take that off the screen. I don't want to see it anymore.
Oh, yeah. I think we probably changed Apache 2, like the top cookbooks here, like Apache 2, Java, Postgres. I don't think we've hit Redis recently. MySQL, Graphite, like Line Cookbook got rewrote by me and
Mark, is it?
Crane, his name's gone.
Mark Gibbons.
Mark, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that Line
are awesome
Cookbook is
community
so
members.
useful. It sometimes feels like the wrong pattern, but there are times when you just can't manage the whole file, and tweaking that one line could just make Chef the right tool.
Yeah. So Line was probably actually going to be the last one. So Line's a really good example of we rewrote things, or I rewrote a cookbook, made it easier to contribute to. So all these rewrites are basically designed to make our lives easier, and new contributors able to kind of come in and be like, right, I understand how this code works now. I can extend this. I can make a new PR, and the standards are there. Like, I'm going to worry about the boilerplating and that kind of stuff. It's just like, right, I need to write resource for this, and it's going to look like this. I know where to find it, and I know how to write documentation because I've got good examples. And I know how to write some tests, and right, all the examples are there these days. So contributing is probably easier than it ever has been. And the Line Cookbook was like that. So Mark came in after I'd rewritten it and doubled the number of resources. So I duplicated the resources that were there originally, and then said, right, well, that works as is. It's a bit easier to maintain right now. That'd be fine. We'll have to go and do something else. And then Mark came in a couple of weeks later, and it was like, I've got some presents for you, and then dumped like double the code base. It was amazing because he could contribute some really, really complicated resources without moving it to custom resources and moving to our new model. That would probably added a 30 or 40% overhead into figuring out how to actually get things into the right places and stuff. So, I mean, Chef has changed hugely in the last 3 or 4 years. From 12.5, it's not even the same beast anymore. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Man, yeah, sorry. Like every time you all speak, I like 14 topics come up in my mind that I'm like, ooh, I want to ask that, but I'm not going to interrupt. I want to hear the whole thing. And then by the end of it, I'm like, oh, shoot. I've chased my tail so much that I can't remember any of them. Gosh, what was it? Nope. You were talking about the line cookbook right at the beginning, and there was something you said that made me think about we did a book review, Mandy Walls and I, of Jean Kim's latest book, The Unicorn Project, the sequel to the Phoenix Project. And one of the, yes, thank you, Garth. It's a rainbow unicorn in Twitch, if you did not see that. I love it so much. Oh, yes, and Mandy, before I go on about the Unicorn Project, Mandy just pointed out Mark Gibbons is also doing a session at ChefConf on Tuesday on the Chef Server API, which kind of goes back to what Brittany's talk was about, utilizing that API with ServiceNow and other whatever you want. Anywho, so the Unicorn Project, one of the recurring themes, or like one of the points that it really wants to hit home about, like the software development lifecycle or DevOps or whatever like term you want to give to it, the practices and patterns that you're using, and it is if you don't make the system easy to build and test in the first place, nobody's going to contribute to it. And the whole book basically revolves around how their system is unbuildable. And so like, that's the whole basic point of the story, is like, if a new person gets hired and they cannot build the system to like on day one, then you probably have some technical debt you need to pay off. You have some documentation you probably need to write, maybe a little bit. And you have some like systems to kind of tweak. And that really like resonates or echoes, I think, what you just said, right? Like that's everything that you all are working to do, is like clean things up, make sure there's documentation, or at the very least like a standardized way across all of these cookbooks to understand what's going on with them, how to contribute with them, like yeah, what the use cases or the goal for that cookbook is, making all of that stuff usable to people who didn't write it in the first place, or maybe don't. Like sometimes with me, someone will hand me a cookbook like, this does the thing you need it to do. That doesn't mean I understand what the heck that cookbook is doing at all. I know it does the thing I need it to do, but I don't necessarily know how. So making sure that that like that sort of baseline for a standard is there, is like that is going to make you as an organization so much more successful, which means since the Sous Chefs are doing it, that makes chefs community that much more successful. Like that is the organization that you're serving. And so beyond like, I'm sure your work organizations benefit from some of the work, like from the work that you do, but yeah. So yeah, I think there's a really common theme on May's stream for Chef Live, and that is like me expressing gratitude to everybody who comes on for like the the sheer amount of like yourselves that you put into like making Chef successful, not the company necessarily, but like the solution, the idea, and like the community, the culture behind it. I'm like, yeah, I'm full of gratitude and appreciation for all the stuff that and this, like, Brittany, I know you're not one of the sous chefs, but this does go back to you too. You have also contributed a huge amount back into the chef community, even if it's just sharing like your experience and telling people this is the benefit that your organization can get from things, and that is, to be clear, not all you have contributed. That's just what we've talked about today, essentially. So like, yeah, huge thank you to all four of you, and everybody who's part of the Sous Chefs organization, but really you all put so much value into like it, into not just like our lives at Chef Software, but everybody who is using these solutions. So thank you. And Mandy, I don't know if you're watching the chat, but Mandy just put like 16 purple hearts in there. And I think that means she feels exactly the same way, if not more appreciative of you guys.
Can I just pick up on that a bit? Because the main reason I've been so active in the community is because the community is so welcoming. I joined with no knowledge of Chef and had Dan basically telling me how to write custom resources after I turned up in the Sous Chefs channel by accident. I never did leave, sorry, mate. But I think that's the thing with...
You've written Zarima bot, you've redeemed yourself, it's all good.
But I think that's the thing is, we as a community, we write a lot of things and we do appreciate people saying thank you and being grateful. But we also reach out to the community ourselves from time to time to ask, how do we do things? And what are other people's patterns for things? And having other people give up also their time just to help people who are just stuck, it's just makes you feel so sort of nice that anyone's willing to help anyone and nobody cares, as long as we're all trying to get on the same journey and make things better.
I think I have a similar opinion, because like I started with Chef out of necessity. I started with Chef because I had to learn it, to work on it or whatever. But you really stay around and you really put back into it what you've gotten out of it, because they're welcoming and because of the chef friends and because of all of that. So I mean, that's what I've said it before. That's what keeps me around, is the community.
Yeah, very well said, both of you. And definitely the reason that I applied to work at Chef in the first place. Yeah, you all contribute to that welcomeness and inclusivity as well. So thank you for like living the phrase that people at Chef love to use, is eating your own dog food, I guess. So thank you for continuing to make the community welcoming. And thank you for sharing, like I already said it, but thank you for sharing your time. And like that, that could be the end of my sentence and it would still be like your time is one of the most valuable things in my opinion. So just the sheer point that you, or the sheer fact that you've given us your time is already amazing. Thank you. But yeah, sorry for that like little tangent on gratitude, I guess. Oh yes, a sushi emoji. I want a sushi emoji too. I think
sushi.
What's that?
I'm tempted to go and get some sushi now.
Yeah, the amount of sushi I've eaten with Mandy is uncountable, I think, at this point.
Okay.
With chef employees. And yeah, so like I haven't used Chef in I don't know how long now. I haven't used it in production in a really long time, but I still write Chef cookbooks and I still come to ChefConf and do all this community stuff because of the community is so welcoming and friendly, and it looked balmy from the outside. I'm like, what? Why are you still writing cookbooks, Dan? You haven't used any of your cookbooks. I don't think I've ever used HA proxy in production, but like I rewrote that sucker once. But contributing on things you don't use is not always not that bad actually, because sometimes it's a documentation fix. Like documentation fixes are the best things ever. Like Jason and I and John will miss documentation fixes, especially if it's PR that's like 15 pages long. And you're like, documentation is probably fine, or whatever. And someone comes along and you're like, you type it in 15 places, Dan. I'm like, oh, thank you. But those people who've gone through the documentation and nitpicked because they've been reading the documentation and they've gone like, oh, I'll just fix this for you.
Yeah.
And
I think.
yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah,
I think
Joe's
dropped again.
Yeah, I think she's dropped again. But I was gonna just take on that point because I'm fortunate to come from a workplace that basically has the mentality of if it's not of core business value, feel free to open source it. So when my workplace started with Chef and we're a Windows shop in work, there was not very strong Windows support in early Chef 12. So I'm fortunate that my boss at the time, so Richard Levy, has put his name all over the Windows cookbook and the IIS cookbook. And he went and added support because he went, if I need it, I'll open source it and send it to Chef and then Chef will manage it for me. And I don't have to worry about long-term support. But while I can see the business value in Chef supporting it, I can also see the case in, hey, everyone else is going to want to do this. So if everyone does it a standard way, then they're going to slowly add more features that when I suddenly need a feature, it's possibly going to be there and I've not had to do any work. Whereas if everyone's closed source, or it just becomes a bit more painful to manage there.
I think we've lost John and we've lost Jodie.
Yeah, I was going to do a share on some of the GitHub Actions stuff that you didn't cover, if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let's see if I know how to do a screen share correctly.
I didn't, so.
So let me know if you can see the screen with the VS Code cookbook on it. Cool. So VS Code cookbook is actually the first cookbook I ever wrote for Sous, which I wrote because I wanted to configure VS Code and then I never got around to implementing it on my own machine. But I also use it as my playground because almost no one uses it in that sense. So what I'm wanting to sort of show off here is in our pull request system, we have a few really nice features. The first thing is Danger. For those who haven't used Danger, it's a great way of giving feedback to people without needing a human to review everything every time. So here, I've created a PR and I didn't go and put a changelog in. Well, rather than waiting till somebody in Sous Chefs has time to go and do a review and goes, you missed a changelog, we have a Danger file, which runs part of our build system and understands Git. I think, what's the website for the Danger, Dan? Could you drop it in the Twitch stream?
Yeah.
So we use the Ruby version of Danger because, well, Chef, Ruby, easy. And it's basically around things like detecting code changes, test changes, and trying to give that early feedback to people so that they can fix it before you sit there and review it. So yeah, danger.systems, if that could get dropped on the Twitch stream, I'd appreciate it. I can't really open that at the same time. It's going to look weird. The other thing that was implemented in the GitHub Actions recently is problem matchers. So what problem matchers are these annotations here. So they're really, really useful, in my opinion, of not having to look through the logs as to why your build's failed and to be able to see exactly which lines are having problems and exactly what is complaining. So you've got some markdown lint on YAML lint problems in this file, in these files here. And then if I go down far enough, you've got a delivery fault because I've purposely broken delivery for Cookstyle. But I guess I have a personal preference for trying to bring this feedback as close to the user. And I also find that tooling's logs, while useful, are not always fun to read through if your GitHub Actions is great, but its UIs are still being developed and it's a little slow at times when you're trying to get logs out of it. Whereas this is just in your face. Where's the problem? Okay, cool. I can go and fix that. But yeah, the other nice thing of this is it's not just what you've changed, it's the other faults outside of the files you've changed. So at the bottom here, we've got markdown lint errors that aren't actually related to the code changes in this pull request. But hey, here are the annotations for the other things that have failed. But yeah, so that's really all I wanted to demo, that these things exist. And basically, there's a GitHub org called Actions Hub, which has all of this code in it. And all that means is it's a nice place to just go and read the docs and implement chef testing in your own stuff. If I go into the right folders, it helps. So things like installing Chef, running delivery, YAML lint, markdown lint, it's all just available. It should be a few lines of code and some copy and pasting, and your cookbooks should just start testing without pain. And I think that's what we all want in our build systems, is not having the irritants or the time consuming, how do I set up the CI system? How do I actually test things? I just want to write my code and get my feedback. But yeah, any questions from Brittany or Dan on this?
I was going to say, is it worth showing Actions Hub where you keep the actions?
Yeah, can do. I only took the name Actions Hub because it was available at the time and it seemed fun.
There's another one with Actions-Hub, I think.
Glad to know I got there first. But yeah, so at the moment, this is fairly chef focused and copied a lot of the things from Sous Chefs on Terraform orgs. But yeah, Chef installs Markdown lint, Docker, YAML lint, delivery, regular kitchen. Danger's interesting. One catch on GitHub Actions is it won't forward any secrets through to forks. So Danger doesn't actually work as an action because you're normally running from a forked PR. And you really don't want them all to have the secret that will go and access your stuff. But yeah, that's really it from the Actions Hub side of things. You can see John's back as well now.
Hey y'all. Hey y'all. So my internet is not coming back, which is glorious and wonderful. It's decided to take the weekend early. So we are going to actually wrap up the stream today a little bit early, so that I can get my mental state ready to reach out to my internet support team and figure out what's going on. So thank you for joining us. Keep an eye on the stream here. Like I said, on Wednesday, we're going to be hosting a trivia night. So come join us, even if it's just to like drink a drink with us and say hi. My coworkers, Rob Kidd and Matt Lyman are going to be hosting trivia night. So it promises, Matt Lyman graduated from the same school of theater that I graduated from. So if that tells you anything, I think it'll be a pretty fun night. So keep an eye out. Like I said, head to chefconf.io to register and get access to the full agenda. And we will see you on Wednesday night for trivia night. Bye, y'all.
See ya.
Yeah.